things were there. So now the issue is that what was happening was, in spite of the fact that everything was elaborated in this judgment, in spite of that, a number of cases, what was happening was that the compliance was not happening as far as these provisions were concerned. The reasons to believe were not provided. Then objections were not disposed of. So all those things, and ultimately the entire reassessment proceedings used to get vitiated because of non-compliance of the Supreme Court order. So this was one of the challenges which was being faced. And as has been correctly elaborated by Gunjan, that Section 148A has been brought into the statute. This is nothing else. I mean, what has been brought into 148A is nothing else but what was already existing in the GK and drive shaft judgment. So they have just put it in the form of an enactment, and this is more for the knowledge of the departmental officers, because that was the challenge. The departmental officers were probably not aware of GK and drive shaft, and they were not following GK and drive shaft. This was one of the problems which was being faced. Second challenge which was being faced was that we had two sections. One was 148. Now 148 was with respect to reassessment proceedings, and then we had 153A, which was for assessment in the case of search cases. So now, in fact, I don't know, we've never had the occasion to discuss this particular thing, but I always used to feel that why do we need two sections for this? Why? And this also became a controversy. Controversy happened to such an extent that assessing officer, instead of initiating 153A, he initiated 148, which was struck down. They say that 153A is there, so the assessing officer should have initiated 153A proceedings instead of 148. So there were judicial rulings which said that if 153A exists, then 148 cannot be resorted to by the assessing officer. Second issue was that in 153A, there was judgment of Kabul Chawla, Delhi High Court. Now, in this particular judgment, the Honorable Delhi High Court had held that the assessment post-search or any addition thereafter, to the returned income, has to be based on the material found during the course of search. So it is basically incriminating material which has been found during the course of search. So this, in a number of cases, this restricted the action by the department against the SSC. In a number of cases, what happened was that blatantly there was prima facie case that the income has escaped assessment, but because no evidence was found during the course of search, or it was incriminating material was not found during the course of search, so the addition could not have been made in the hands of the SSC. And moreover, there were judgments which said that you cannot resort to 148. So this was creating a problem for the department. And honestly speaking, it is not just that I am thinking in perspective now, or I am thinking in retrospective now, but then I always used to feel that why 148 is not expanded to include the search cases also, because that would reduce the complexity which is there in the reassessment proceedings unnecessarily, which are there. So these were the three challenges which are being faced. And then one of the another important areas, which was a gray area, which created a lot of problem for the department, was reasons to believe. Now, whether it is reasons to believe, whether it was reasons to suspect, or whether the reasons to believe were not there. So all these issues have been debated over the years. There are so many judicial rulings, so many cases, so many reassessment proceedings struck down because there were no reasons to believe. Reasons to believe were not properly recorded. They were not, the belief was not properly recorded by the sanctioning authority. So there are so many other issues which happened with respect to reasons to believe. So now, I mean, all these challenges the department was facing, which was giving rise to a lot of litigation. And as a result of that litigation, what was happening was that not just the department was losing the revenue, but it was, even the appellate authorities were burdened with, whether it is, because as far as the first appellate authority is concerned, possibly he was not entertaining. I mean, he was not giving due regard to the arguments of the SSC with respect to those technical issues or legal issues which were there. But then IT-80 onwards, IT-80 and High Courts, the large number of cases pertaining to 148 were there as far as the old provisions were concerned. Another area was that audit objections were not taken as an information based on which the reassessment proceedings could have been initiated. So there they said that this was an opinion of the audit party. So this cannot be a basis for initiating the reassessment proceedings, which have been specifically brought into the statute now, so that the reassessment proceedings can be initiated on that. So now what has happened primarily? I mean, this is the background. These were the challenges which were being faced by the department. Now the department had to come up with something, some amendment or some change which could solve the problems. Now, as far as enactment of tax laws or enactment of any amendments to the tax laws is concerned, I have very strong reservations. The reason is that our present system of enacting tax laws are grossly inadequate as far as the manner in which the tax laws, the fiscal laws are being enacted. And that is why we are seeing the kind of mess which is being created by all these fiscal laws. I think we have all been witness to what GST laws, the issues with GST laws created, which is still going on. It is an unending process. And the kind of complexity or kind of compliance requirement which has been brought into GST is humongous. I mean, in the sense that at times I say that the way our laws in our country are, I think any person who's into business or profession, he should be trained for complying with the fiscal laws, and he should be doing that. And if he has some time left after doing all the compliances, then he should focus on his business. So this is the extent of the tax laws, the complexities which we have in our tax laws. Similarly, as far as the income tax is concerned, why do I say that enactment of tax laws or enactment of any amendments to tax laws needs a total revamping? The reason here is that what is happening in the parliament, we all know, for whatever reasons. I mean, I'm not the person who should be who should be deciding as to who's to be blamed by the government or opposition, or as the case maybe. This is one aspect of it. Second aspect of this is that the kind of people we have in the parliament, very few of them would be familiar with the tax laws and the complexities which are there in the tax laws. So they probably do not have the skill sets to evaluate or to debate on the provisions which are being enacted. So I'm sure nobody would have ever witnessed or never read about any debate on a tax amendment or the Finance Act which is being brought in every year. Because the reason is that our member of parliaments do not have that kind of skill sets to go into the details of those. Now, we can talk about retrospective tax, we can talk about policy, but then when we come to the actual implementation or legislation of the laws, possibly the parliament, the reference should go to the select committee. Select committee should have some experts on board who should look at it. And then there should be a public debate, or there should be, the enactments should be open for public to give their comments on them. They should take a feedback from the public and tax experts, and thereafter the tax enactment should go to the parliament. Now, what is happening right now is we have TPL. TPL is the Tax Policy and Legislative Wing of CBDT. So we have one joint secretary there. We have 2-3 directors, maybe a bigger team now, because the kind of amendments which are being made possibly. Now they make the amendment, they draft the bill, which goes straight to the parliament. The parliament, without debate, passes it, and ultimately, who bears the brunt of it? The brunt is most of the time borne by the tax consultants, or if the litigation is there, then the SSC bears that particular brunt of the cost, as well as the time and effort involved for getting into the litigation. So now what is happening is that this tax policy legislation, whatever they make, that gets passed as an act. And that is why we are seeing that there can now ultimately what was a constitutional requirement as far as enactment of tax laws was concerned. As far as enactment of tax laws was concerned, the constitutional requirement was that it should be debated in the parliament, where we have 542 member of parliament in Lok Sabha, who should have put in their mind to it. They should apply their collective wisdom before passing each and every section or each and every proviso or each and every enactment which is there. They should have a threadbare discussion on this. Unfortunately, this is not happening. So that is why we are in a state of affairs of our laws where anything can get passed as a law, and subsequently there can be complexities or problems as a result of this, specifically fiscal laws also. And besides fiscal law also, we are seeing a lot of other laws also, which subsequent to their passing are seeing a lot of protests also, and a lot of criticism, a lot of issues being faced. Then there are amendments being made. And I'm sure all of you must have heard that story which is there. The story goes something like this, that a CEO of a company, a multinational company, he went back to his house and he saw his son very busy doing something. So he asked his son, "Why are you so hassled? What are you doing?" So the son replied, "Dad, I've been asked to write an essay on elephant. So now that is why I'm trying to work out as to how I should write." He said, "Forget about it. I'll take help from my senior people and I'll get you something." So he said, how much time do you have?" He said, "I have my summer breaks. You can give it to me within a month's time." He said, "Fine." So the CEO, he goes back to his office next day. He calls us three of the brilliant brains which he has. So we have, one of them was Japanese, the other one happened to be British, and the third one happened to be an Indian. So he asked all of them to write an essay on this elephant and give it to him, and he gave them a week's time. So by next day, Japanese person, he got back to his CEO and said, "Well, I have written this essay." He submitted his essay. He asked him, "What have you written?" He said, "I have written on elephant and its economic uses." So he was very impressed. Yes, I mean, Japanese, they are good economic people. Then that is why their economy is doing so well. Most of the time they are doing so well, being such a tiny nation, they have huge economy. Okay. And then a couple of days later, the Britisher came back. He asked him, what have you written, I mean, regarding elephants?" He said, "I have written on elephant and the royal family." He said, "Okay, I'm impressed, because in British, there is a general obsession with the royal family. So everything you want to relate with the royal family." So he said, "Okay." So he keeps that particular essay also. So once time passes, so he suddenly realizes that given 1 week's time to the Indian also to give his essay, he hasn't returned back. So he calls him up. He very hurriedly rushes down and says, "Okay, sir, I'm just about to be ready, but anyway, I'll give you my submissions, whatever I have written." So he comes up with a very small book, which is running into, say, 30 pages, and then a huge volume, which is running into 300 pages. So the CEO asked him, "What is this? I had asked you to write an essay on elephant. What are all these booklets?" He said, "This smaller book is the Elephant Control and Regulation Act." So Indians are very interested in, Indians as Indians, we want a law for everything. So we have an Elephant Control and Regulation Act. He could think of as Elephant Control and Regulation Act. He said, "Fine. Something different you have come up with other than Japanese and British. But what is this big volume of 300 pages?" He said, "Sir, I drafted that Elephant Control and Regulation Act. After drafting that act, I realized there should be some changes. So these 300 pages contain the amendments which should be made to this particular act of 30 pages." So our laws, as far as our country is concerned, it seems to be very truly reflecting the manner in which the laws are being made in our country. So now, as far as 147, the reassessment proceedings are concerned, the challenges were there with the department. The department has made changes. They have, in fact, and the total entire sections have been replaced. Now, this is very seldom it happens, because most of the time there are complexities in removing the sections, because there are pending in proceedings which are going on. Then, depending upon case to case, a number of times sunset clauses are put in. But in this particular case, what has been done is that 147, 148, 149, 151, all these sections have been completely replaced. The old sections are gone. We have replaced new sections. Now, the challenges which were being faced as far as non-compliance of Honorable Supreme Court in the case of GK and Driveshaft is concerned, there, of course, the entire process which was explained in GK and Driveshaft has been codified in section 148A, which Gunjan discussed at length, that he has to, based on information. Now, there are 4 steps out of 2 steps where a prior approval has to be taken. So based on the information which is there with the assessing officer, he has to make an inquiry, but the inquiry is subject to a prior approval from the specified authority. So in other words, this is the specified authority. He needs to take an approval before he even commences the inquiry. So the way the section is worded, he cannot complete the inquiry first and then go to the assessing officer, to the senior, to take a confirmation about the inquiry which he has made, because it says that he has to conduct an inquiry if required with the prior approval of specified authority. Now, it is a very welcome provision. The reason is that if he once takes otherwise what would happen is, this would give a blanket permission to the assessing officer to issue notices lock, stock and barrel for making inquiries about every information. So now, if he has to make an inquiry, there has to be a prior approval from the specified authority before he starts even making an inquiry. Now, once he's making an inquiry, he has to provide an opportunity of heard to the SSC. And this notice also has to be served with the prior approval of the specified authority. In both these places, the word which has been used is prior approval. So for issuing a notice to him, it is a show cause notice which has to be issued by the assessing officer. Now, this show cause notice, there's a time frame which has been given, that he has to reply within a certain time frame, where minimum 7 days are given and maximum 30 days. Or on the in case the SSC needs more time, then he can seek an extension of the time. Now, then the show cause notice would obviously specify as to what is the information which is there and why notice under section 148 should not be issued to him based on that particular information. Now, based on this inquiry and based on, so first step is an inquiry with the prior approval of the assessing officer. So the assessing officer, first of all, takes a prior, when he gets an information, he gets an approval from the specified authority, then he starts his inquiry. Once he has started his inquiry, and during inquiry, he has to give an opportunity to the SSC if he feels that, yes, this is a fit case where assessment proceedings can be initiated. The assessing officer would issue a show cause notice to the SSC and asking him to explain why one notice under section 148 should not be issued to him. Third step is that once you have filed the reply, then he should consider this particular reply. Now, the clause C, which is there to section 148A, says that consider the reply. And as Gunjan had rightly pointed out, that merely saying that he has considered the reply is not sufficient. When we say consider the reply, means that there has to be an application of mind by the assessing officer when he's considering that reply. Considering the reply does not mean merely saying that, okay, now you issue a show cause notice for something to the SSC. The SSC gives an elaborate answer to all the queries which have been raised. He explains everything. Now, the assessing officer says that I've considered all the submissions, and in my considered opinion, it is a fit case for initiating the reassessment proceedings, which will be very unjustified. So in this case, consider means there has to be an application of mind by the assessing officer. Then we have the last step here is that decide on the basis of material available on record including reply of the SSC, whether it is a fit case for issue of 148, and that also by taking a prior approval on the order from the specified authority. 5 बजे आना था. So in other words, what is happening is that so there is a categorical procedure which has been prescribed as far as 148A is concerned. Now, so the compliance of GK and drive shaft should at least be not a hindrance for the department now, because the assessing officer should hopefully not commit mistakes as far as 148A is concerned, because 148A is a proper codified provision now to take care of the High Court's Honorable Supreme Court's ruling in the case of GK and drive shaft. Now, the second issue which was there was regarding two separate sections with respect to reassessment and assessment in the case of search. To my mind, it is a very logical and a welcome step, because there was no reason to have, to my mind, two sections. It may cause a little, I would say, discomfort to a lot of people. It may, but then looking at the amendment per se, I mean, I'm not advocating on behalf of any client right now, or I'm not advocating on the behalf of the SSC right now. But then, yes, looking at it objectively, definitely to my mind, it's a welcome provision. There should be one section which can take care of both reassessment proceedings based on any information, or in the case of a search, both should be taken care of. Now, this would automatically address the Kabul Chawla issue which is there. Now, I think I briefly mentioned that Kabul Chawla basically talks of the Honorable Delhi High Court in the case of Kabul Chawla had held that the assessment in the case of cases of search, the addition, if at all any, has to be made has to be on the basis of incriminating material found during the course of search. So if there is no incriminating material found during the course of search, even if the assessing officer has some other means by getting some information, he cannot assess that under section 153A. So now that Kabul Chawla would be out, because this section is not restricted to the manner in which the section is restricted is that income has escaped assessment. So once the income has escaped assessment, then in search cases, it will be deemed that the assessing officer has information, and he need not comply with 148A in those cases. So that means in the case of a search, based on the material which he has or information which he has, the assessing officer can initiate reassessment proceedings for the relevant years based on that information which is there. Now, audit objections, the final audit objections of C&AG have been specifically included as one of the information based on which reassessment proceedings can be initiated. To my mind, nothing wrong with it, because this was again an area of a lot of dispute, and a lot of reassessment proceeding was struck down because of that. And then, of course, reasons to believe. Now, reasons to believe has been done away with. But then, as Gunjan was rightly pointing out, that the new substituted section now provides that where the assessing officer has information or evidence which suggests that the income has escaped assessment. Now, suggest here word is going to be another focus area where we are possibly going to see a lot of litigation, because whether based on the evidence or the information, is it suggesting that the income has escaped assessment or not, would be a area which would see a lot of litigation in future now. Okay, these were the challenges which have been, to my mind, they have been pretty well addressed and well taken care of as far as the new sections are concerned. But then there are some changes which are there. Now, the changes which are there is that from 4 and 6 years, earlier it used to be 4 years where the tax implication or the income which has escaped assessment was less than rupees 1 lakh. And if it was more than 1 lakh, then 6 years was there. And obviously the approving authority was the next level, or the higher level of approving authority was there. which has been changed to 3 years and 10 years. But there are difference. There is a difference between 4 and 6 and 3 and 10. Now, to some extent, you can say that now 6 years period has been replaced by 3 years now. Because 6 years, the assessing officer could initiate reassessment proceedings from within a period of 6 years from the end of the assessment year. If the tax effect of the income which has escaped assessment was more than rupees 1 lakh, and the approval of the next higher authorities, PCIT, had to be taken. The same thing needs to be done as far as 3 years is concerned, because up to 50 lakh rupees, 3 years is the period available up to which the reassessment proceedings can be initiated. Now, there is a second limb, the clause B, which has been added here. And this clause B says that the reassessment proceedings can be initiated for a period of 10 years from the end of the assessment year. So if the AO has in his possession an evidence which reveals that income chargeable to tax represented in the form of an asset has escaped assessment is likely to be more than 50 lakh rupees for that year. It is, if it is the income chargeable to tax which has escaped assessment is 50 lakhs or likely to be 50 lakhs. That means even if it is not in substance 50 lakhs, if it is likely to be above 50 lakhs, then also this clause B can be invoked in this case. So here what happens is that the window of 10 years is available with the assessing officer. Now, the question here is, what is an asset? And I think here also, I think Gunjan has already explained that we have immovable property being land or building or both, as the case may be. We have shares and securities and land loans and advances, and we have deposits in the bank account. So these are 4 categories of asset which are there. So immovable property, land and building, and of both, of course, shares and securities, loans and advances, and deposits in the bank account. Now, this concept of income represented by an asset, or the asset income represented by an asset concept was not there in 148 up till now, but this concept was there in 153A. So 153A, same thing was there, that 6 years you could assess even if this income which has escaped assessment is less than 50 lakh rupees. Then you could assess it under section 153A for 6 years. But if you wanted to go beyond 6 years, then identical condition should have been was there in section 153A. So this condition has been borrowed or shifted from, because 153A is no longer there. The sunset clause has been put in. So search taking place after 1st of April or 1st of thereafter 1st April 2021. This 153A will not be invoked. In all those search cases after 1/4/2021, they would be invoked under section 148. There's a presumption which has been a deeming fiction which has been introduced, that will be deemed that the assessing officer has information in his possession that the income has escaped assessment, and based on this information, he can initiate proceedings. So I have 2 questions here. One question is, when I say that income represented by an asset, now what does this mean? And why do we need to create this particular category, and what is the implication of this particular category, income represented by an asset? Now, please try to understand. As I look at it, the objective was that the information system of the department has become very, I would say, it is very, the information is coming at a very quick pace with the department. They generally get the information very fast, and they are acting on that information also. So they said 3 years would suffice. We don't need to dig prior to 3 years because most of the information is available in 3 years. To my mind, 10 years meant that if you have an asset which has not been disclosed to the department comes to know of that particular asset, then a number of times it happened that you had purchased a house property 6 years back, or you have you have any asset which is more than 6 years back. Now the reassessment proceedings, the assessing officer could not go beyond 6 years. So it became in spite of the fact that knowing that this is an income which has escaped assessment, the department could not do anything. Similarly, in search also this thing happened. a house, immovable properties, land were found in which were prior to say 6 years, and the department could not do anything because there was a cap of initiating proceedings beyond 6 years. So here the idea was that here the window should be a little larger. We should have 10 years in case the SSC has concealed an asset and that asset is in possession of the SSC, then we should not restrict ourselves to 3 years or 6 years earlier and now 3 years. The assessing officer should have liberty to go up to 10 years and reassess that particular asset. That was the objective. But then when the manner in which it has been worded and the manner in which it has been brought into the statute is that if the asset is disposed of, even prior to the search or prior to the initiation of the reassessment proceedings, then also the reassessment proceedings can be initiated against the SSC under this provision. Similar provision was there in 153A earlier, so it has been borrowed from 153A. It has been shifted, in fact, not borrowed. Now, one important thing which has been left out here is that the earlier provisions under section 148 provided that there are 16 years were available to the assessing officer from the end of the assessment year if the income was in relation to any asset which was located outside India and which is chargeable to tax but had escaped assessment. Now that particular 16-year period has been left out totally now. So now, if the income chargeable to tax which has escaped assessment is less than 50 lakh rupees, the assessing officer has only 3 years from the end of the assessment year to initiate reassessment proceedings. On the other hand, if this asset is more than 50 lakh rupees, then even if this asset has been disposed of before initiating of the proceedings, even in such cases, the window available to the assessing officer is 10 years. So here, now I really, because the idea of 16 years was that because internationally, I mean, getting information and all those things might be taking some time. So that 16-year period was introduced, and it was not very long back. I think just I think 4 or 5 years back, the 16-year provision was introduced. If I remember correctly, Mr. Arun Jaitley used to be the finance minister at that point of time when the 16 years was included. So now the 16 years has been done away with. Instead of 3 time periods now, we only have 2, 3, and 10. Now I have another question here. Can the assessing officer make roving inquiries here? Can the assessing officer do like this? That let's suppose he gets information regarding some issue in 1 year. Let's suppose 2 years back, which is within that clause A, within that period of 3 years, which is there, he has some information regarding any income which has escaped assessment. Now, can he conduct inquiry against me for 10 years to get information and make a roving inquiry? That means he practically makes a full scrutiny of all my 10 years by asking me to submit this bank statement for all the 10 years, then my details of all properties purchased during the last 10 years, details of all transactions which I've entered into. So can he make a roving inquiry like this? Can he send me a notice like this where he can seek all this information? To my mind, no, he cannot do it. So he has to be initially restricted only to the extent of information, which is information based on evidence which is available with him. So he has to restrict to that only. Thereafter, I mean, the initial initiation has to be like this. Now, even while making assessment, the section does provide that in the event of any other income which comes to his knowledge, during the course of the assessing such income, if he comes across some other income which has escaped assessment, he can assess that particular income also without complying with 148A. This is what the proviso to section provides. Now, here also, but then this is limited to what he comes across during the course of assessment of this income. So to my mind, roving inquiries where he starts asking me questions about 10 years is not appropriate. And if he has come across information regarding any 1 year, then he should be restricting it to that particular year. If he has no information, then it is not his job to make inquiry for 10 years. Now, this is what my opinion is. To my mind, it cannot be done. Now, then in addition to this, the concept has changed from reasons to believe to information. Now, the concept of information was already there earlier, that the SSC, the information is, the assessing officer is in possession of information or evidence which reflects escapement of income. This was the concept earlier, which was amended and then limited to only reasons to believe, which was there. So now we have gone back to information, and information basically has been now been defined. So we have two important informations which are there. One is the risk management strategy of the department, wherein they keep on collating the information. And I must say one thing: the manner in which the department is doing data mining is really amazing. I mean, it is not just their in-house capability which is being used, which would be, I mean, grossly insufficient, keeping in view the kind of data mining which has been done. Now, I came across some multinational foreign companies, data companies have been engaged. They are trying to procure, or they have already procured the softwares wherein all this data mining can be done and the information can be collected. So there's a huge information base on which the department is working with some very high-tech, so not just softwares, but the skill sets of such outside agencies, where thousands of crores of rupees is being spent for doing that data mining to collect information and then initiate proceedings against the SSC. And by far, in most of the cases, the information which is being collected is being used for two purposes. One is either 132 action, that means either search or seizure, or reassessment proceedings which are initiated under Section 148. So primarily, this is the background and the issues which are there. But then one last issue which comes here is that, as Gunjan was trying to explain with that slide which was there, that because of change of number of periods and change which is happening, there are some years which are going out of the ambit of reassessment, some years which are getting included. There's a proviso which has been introduced, which I think Gunjan has already discussed, so I'm not going into the details of that. But then, yes, some of the notices or actions had to be taken before 31st March 2021. And now we are seeing a new spurt of litigation which is there, where a number of writs have been filed. And I would request Mr. Devvrat, he's an advocate, to share with us his information and his knowledge on this particular subject as to what is happening and why writs are being filed, and what is the court's observation or stand in this regard. So over to Mr. Dev. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. First of all, thank you, sir and ma'am, for explaining the whole concept and the whole legislation. I'll try and explain what the whole controversy is, which has led to various writ petitions in high courts throughout the country. So to start off, let's see, am I able to share my screen? Yeah. So let's start off. So earlier, before the Finance Act amendments in 2021, the earlier section read that the assessing officer, before issuing any notice, should record his reasons for doing so. That's all it said. But if you pick up any notice which has been sent under 148, you'll see that it's done in a very mechanical way, and it just says that I have reasons to believe that your income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment. That's all it used to say. There were no reasons recorded, there was no reasons given, and it was done in a very mechanical way and sent. So now we see that 148, the change which has been gotten into the section 148 is that it has been subject to provisions of 148A, which is a new amended section, which has been newly added. into the Income Tax Act. So now 148 has to comply with provisions of 148A before a notice can be sent. So now if we have a closer look at 148A, it tells us that, are you able to view 148A? There you go, 148A. So now 148A brings, like sir and ma'am have already talked about this in detail. It talks about conduct any, now 4 steps: conduct any inquiry, provide an opportunity of being heard, notice to show cause as to why a notice under 148 should not be issued, consider the reply of the assessee, and decide. So now in this we see that it elaborates upon the whereby earlier 148 only said that there should be, that he should record his reasons to believe. This further elaborates that how he should. Now these are in line with principles of natural justice. So we have principles of natural justice that nobody can be a judge in his own cause, or that a speaking order should be passed, so that there is judicial accountability. That we always, if we give power without having any accountability, that would always create rifts. So it's important to have some judicial accountability. Now this ensures that. So now we see that it not only says to provide a show cause notice, but it also further says that consider the reply of the assessee. So now I rather find this hilarious that we have to go into such depth and detail to instruct an officer to even consider the reply, which should have been just his natural duty of considering a reply and, furnishing or passing an order after considering the reply, because that is a concept of natural justice, that you cannot pass an order without hearing the other party or giving the other party an opportunity to be heard. So I rather find this hilarious that this has to be expressly put in the statute, but that is the need of the hour. So we say consider the reply of the assessee, and further it says issue a notice under 148 by passing an order. Now, an order, whenever we say pass an order, we always mean a speaking order. We always mean an order with reasons in it. So now it cannot be just a notice. It has to be a notice which has to be accompanied by an order. So these were the changes that were got into this. Now, what led to the controversy was that due to COVID, the courts, the parliament had enacted an act which was the Taxation and Other Laws Relaxation and Amendment of Certain Provisions Act. I'll just share that. Here it is. So you see that this act came into was given the assent of the president on 29 September 2020. However, it has retrospective effect because it says that it shall deemed to have come into force on 31st March 2020. So, and further we see what effect it has is that now when we see the chapter 2, relaxation of certain provisions of specified act. Now the Income Tax Act is a specified act for our purposes, where any time limit has been specified in or prescribed or notified under the specified act. So it says completion of any proceedings or passing of any order or issuance of any notice. Issuance of any notice. Further, if we go and read, it says that where completion or compliance of such actions, compliance within which the time limit for completion or compliance of such action shall, notwithstanding contained in the specified act, stand extended to 31st March 2021. So therefore it extended it by a whole year. So it comes into effect, effectively it comes into effect on 31st March 2020, and it extends the time up till 31st March 2021. So no issues with this here. And so we see that this time period was extended to be up to 1 year. So now what happened is after this, on 31st March 2021, the Finance Act brings up changes in the Income Tax Act, and it changes 148 and brings up 148A, and it brings all these changes in the provisions. So now for that, now what effect it has? 1 second, let me share with you. So earlier the time was extended till 31st March 2021. Now further a notification was issued by the Central Board of Direct Taxes that issuance of notices under 148 as per time specified in section 149 or sanction under section 151 of the Income Tax Act from 31st March 2021, they were extended up to 30th of April 2021. So another month was extended. Now, where the controversy comes is in this explanation. Now, if we look at this explanation, it says for removal of doubts, it is hereby clarified that for the purpose of issuance of notice under 148 as per time limit specified in section 149 or sanction under section 151 of the Income Tax Act, under this subclause, the provisions of section 148 and section 149 and section 151 of the Income Tax Act, as the case may be, as they stood as on the 31st of March 2021, before the commencement of the Finance Act 2021 shall apply. So now this is where the controversy begins, is that any notices served during this time period, even though the old act has been repealed, the old 148 has been replaced, 148A has been added, 149 has been changed, all these sections have been changed, yet this says that any notice after this time period has been extended from 31st March 2021 to 30th April, any notice which is issued now will still will still be governed by the old law, old procedural law that has been removed altogether from the act. Now, this time period did not only end at 30th of April 2021, it was further extended by another notification, which share with you guys. We see another notification that further extended this time from 30th April. It extended it to 30th of June. And we see the same explanation here as well, that these, as the case may apply, as they stood as on 31st of March, before the commencement of the Finance Act 2021 shall apply. So here again, we see that they expressly said that even though we're extending the time, now the any notices which will be governed will still be governed by the old act, even though that act had been repealed and replaced. So this is where the controversy began. Now we see that the grievances that people have, that grievances that assessees have, is that once that did they have authority to extend that did they have authority to extend the time period by the act? Yes, they were given authority, but did they have the right to stop the application of the new law? Could they extend the operations of the old provisions and defer the application of the new law? Was that possible? Was that the right given to them? But if we see the act, which was the enabling act, which was the relaxation act, if we have an in-depth look at that act, it clearly it does not give them that right. It merely gives them the right to extend the time. Whereas if a new provision has come into play, then they have to comply by those new provisions. They cannot rely upon the old provisions. So now if you have a look at this, it merely says that has been made within when the time limit for completion of such action. So it only allowed them to extend the time. It nowhere said that you have the authority or you have the right to stop operations of the new law, of the amended provisions, that the 148A or 148 and 149. It nowhere said that. It only said that you can extend the time period. So now even they extended the time period, they sent notices, and all these notices were sent according to the old law because of the notification that they got. So now this was the controversy, whether or not they are allowed to extend this, they are allowed to extend time, which is expressly mentioned in the statute, but are they allowed to pause the application of the new provisions and extend the operation of the old provisions? So various writ petitions have been filed all over the country in High Court and in Delhi High Court, Mumbai and Calcutta, and various writ petitions have been filed under the inherent power of the High Court under Article 226. And the High Courts have taken the prima facie view that I'll share that with you. So if we see here, now these notifications, the prima facie view taken by the Delhi High Court is that these notifications are against the statutory interpretation, which is that if a new procedural law has come into place, then you cannot extend the you cannot keep working under the old procedural law. This is a basic, statutory principle. So now what this statute enabling act was only giving you the power to extend time. However, it didn't say that you could pause the operations of the new provisions or extend the time of the old provisions. That is what the courts have also held here, that it is contrary to the said principle. This court is of the prima facie view that by virtue of notification, which is a delegated legislation, the date for implementation of statutory provision cannot be varied or changed. So if the changes were supposed to come on 1st of April 2021, they cannot say that by extending time to 30th June 2021, we are also delaying the application of these new amended provisions. So any of the notices that have to be issued after the enactment of the Finance Act 2021 have to comply with 148A. So there has to be an inquiry. There has to be a show cause notice. He has to consider the show cause notice. He has to pass an order, and then only he can give a notice under 148. But that has not been done in any of these cases. So these writs have been filed. So now what the courts are now doing is that they are listing all these matters on separate dates. So like for Delhi, any matter that any writ that is being filed for these grievances, whether it be that show cause notice was not issued to me, or a speaking order was not passed, or that I wasn't given opportunity, to present my case, or that it is time barred. Any of these four grievances, any writ petition being filed is being listed on 28th of September right now. And they are all being listed on the same date by a common order. So any writ petition filed right now, the court is not hearing the matter right now. They just pass it that it for to be heard on 28th of September. And notices have also been sent to the Attorney General. And we can see a similar order of the Bombay High Court, where I'll share that with you. So this is the Bombay High Court, where you can see the number of writs that have been heard together. All of these are being heard together, and this is just a single day. So all of them, all the writ petitions which are filed in this for this 148 and for the issues that I said, that 140, the show cause notice wasn't issued, I wasn't given a reason, I wasn't given an opportunity to be heard, and or it is time barred. All these controversies are being heard together, and so various other writ have been filed and have been placed to direct notice to respondents, Attorney General for India. And there one lead petition has been set up, and all are being clubbed with it. So again, rule made returnable on 13th. Now this date is for the Bombay High Court. Now all these will be heard on 13th September in the Bombay High Court, and 28th September in Delhi High Court. And for that time period, obviously, both the courts, Delhi High Court also and Bombay High Court and other Calcutta also, has stayed operation of these notices. So no further action can be taken under these notices. And a recent matter in which myself appeared, I'll just share that as well. So here also you can see the amount of writ petitions that have been heard, and which order has been passed together for all these writ petitions on a single day. So there are thousands of writ petitions which will eventually come up for to be heard together, and the controversy would have to be decided if a legislation or a notification does not come before that. So in this also we can see that the court has relied upon the same case that was passed. They've again given the date of 28th September 2021 and list along with the lead writ petition. And it has also further, the Delhi High Court has further gone to say that it is made clear that no adjournment shall be granted on the next date of hearing. So they are ready to hear this matter. And so in case the government steps in and brings a change or brings a notification, the high courts will probably set aside all these notices, is what I can say, because prima facie that seems the view of the courts, because they've stayed operation. And so until unless the government comes up with something, I believe that they'll probably be set aside, and either liberty will be given to the ones which are not time barred. Liberty will be given to them to comply with the provisions of 148A and the new provisions. So it is just we'll have to see how the courts approach this, and because every high court will probably have a different opinion, might have a different opinion, but and if the government does not step in, we'll probably have to wait for the Supreme Court to give its findings. So thank you.
Okay, so I think as far as assessment years 2014, 15, 15, 16, 16, 17 or 17, 18 is concerned, if you have received any 148 after 31st March 21, then you can seek a relief by filing a writ in the High Court with respect to them in case, but then in some cases, the immediate relief would be there, that there'll be a stay. But then in some cases may get covered under clause B, where 10-year period is there. So there, of course, the department can initiate 148A and take action. Or but some cases, so we'll have to go by case. Yeah, Adish wanted to say something. Yes.
Sir, exactly the same point what you just highlighted. Courts at the moment are just giving stays. They are not quashing the 148. So what are they waiting for? This is one thing. Whether they are waiting for an ordinance to come by the government to rectify the anomaly, it's very difficult to understand. Devrat, you have very nicely pointed out, the best thing was anomaly is in the explanation. That is the best part of it, that anomaly lies in the 148 in the explanation given. So explanation rather than explaining is confusing things. So, okay, good for our SSEs. But point therein is, what is the take of the high courts here now, when they feel that this is a blatant error, they should have immediately quashed. They are not quashing it. This means something is posted for September, something is posted for October. So probably they are waiting for government to take action, and then they can get back to it. And very rightly, Sunilji, that was what I wanted to say. Many of the cases would get covered under 148A. Within the 10 years, if that limit, the monetary limit are taken care for, then department will resort to, they'll say 148, no, okay, 148 now. So they will somehow get back to it. Devrat, as the advisor, what will you advise? Whether we should go for a rate or go for 148 and fight it? So what is the best solution? What do you feel in these circumstances where court is not coming out judicially to take a action? So sorry for saying this, but court should have at least one of the courts, even for the Tata matter, Bombay High Court said only says state. Any other matter, they are just staying it. They are not getting into the quashing of it.
No, Adish,
Right.
Adish,
No,
the
but
thing
the
is,
point is
your
the
point
in
is,
this. Sorry. So
I think you
as-
can give your take. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dave,
so
you can proceed. Sorry.
Sure. So for an assessee, I feel that it's a no-brainer that at this point, if they've received a notice under 148, and they should just file a writ in the High Court. On a personal, for a personal assessee, or from personal point of view, for a assessee who has received a notice after 31st March 2020, and the notice will not comply with the new provisions, so that's a no-brainer that they should immediately file a writ, because at least it'll be stayed. That's the first thing. And for the court also has to give an opportunity to the other party. So they've taken a view, they've given liberty, they've issued the notice, they've given liberty to the other party, they've to file a reply, a rejoinder. And they're also waiting for maybe the government to step in and to come out with a clarification, to come out either with the ordinance, and to have probably to already have a solution to this whole controversy, so that all these then become infructuous. So I feel that they're probably waiting for that. But if the government does not step in by then, I feel that all of these which are time barred will probably be set aside. And but there is a possibility that the ones which are not, they might get liberty to refile them. But then even if that is the instance, it works for an SSC because they will have to comply with the new provisions. Then there is no way that the court is going to allow them to give these notices under the old act. That will not happen. So for a SSC, it will be a win-win. It does not matter. Even if these notices, if they are not quashed, they will then have to be complied with the new provisions. So under the new provision also, there are various safeguards which the SSC has. So it's a win-win for the SSC at this point of time.
And in addition to that, I would also like to add, I'll also like to add that here what has been happened is that the high courts have admitted the writs. I mean, here it is sort of an ex parte admission of the writ which has happened, which normally doesn't happen. I mean, they've issued notices. So what has happened is they have admitted the writs, they have issued notices to central government to respond to that. So now what is happening here is that they could not have done it, and ex parte quashing cannot be done without giving an opportunity to the government to respond to that. So, I mean, this is not possible because High Court has to admit a writ, issue notice to the central government, let the central government respond to it, and thereafter, after listening to the arguments and giving an opportunity to both the parties, the final call has to be taken. So possibly, yes. And what you are saying is that definitely the government, I think, would definitely be preparing something on this. And it will be, as what I know of is, they're planning an ordinance because they could not bring a legislature during the monsoon session, because bringing the legislature would have been a problem. As it is, also the parliament was stalled. And if they would have brought in a legislature there, a bill would have got stalled, then they would have been in a soup. And this litigation would have gone. I mean, all these notices would have got quashed. So probably, to my mind, the thinking would be to come up with an ordinance after the parliament is promulgated. So thereafter, I think probably they will come up with an ordinance. It is only a speculation, so we can't be sure as to what the government is planning to do. But there is going to be huge litigation and huge quashing of all these notices in case no corrective or remedial action is taken by the government. Then of course there's going to be huge implications of that. Okay, yes.
So in that case, then Devvrat point is well taken. Then go in for a writ, wait for things to happen, because even if it doesn't happen, an ordinance route is taken, then it will start afresh. So it doesn't mean that you are not given an opportunity of refiling or getting onto it. It cannot be 144 in that case. So everything will start afresh.
Right. Okay. Right. Yes. Anybody else who has any questions? Chaliye, so I think let's call it a day. And Gunjan is still there. We don't see the convener, probably is busy with something else. Probably it was not expected that the program will get wound up so quickly. We were probably expecting it to go on till at least 5 or 5:30. So probably the organizers are not there. So I think on our own,
sir, I'll propose a vote of thanks now. Gunjan, as usual, an excellent presentation. You made a distinction year-wise, whereby we got to know under which clause, which year is get impacted. So even if it's very, very confusing. So to my mind also, I was not getting it. Okay, I just remembered this year, but you just pointed out, okay, this clause, this thing covered. This was excellent. And sir, as usual, what you did, that elephant example will get imprinted. So it is not that you need to get things on. That example is too good. Such same case happened with GST. They came out with a legislation, and within 1 year, there were 365 circulars and notice clarifying and amplifying that good, big, smaller, making a bigger one. So this is the tragedy we are going through. They just get implementing things without even putting a brain. The bureaucracy. Sir, I'll use your quote. We have got used to being ruled. So that is why the rulers make like these babus, the bureaucracy, with the legacy of Sarkar. They just want to continue like that. Inko to aadat hai, let them rule. So no one applies mind getting into this. Thank you, sir, for an excellent thing. And Devvrat, immaculate presentation. Law is not an easy thing to decipher and discuss. Well done. Keep it up. I could make out whatever you said word by word. That's why I had few queries therein. What say about the rest of the house? But it was very nicely done. Gunjan, just a request. Please circulate the presentation because they're very helpful. They're really very helpful. The point by saying, thank you, Devra. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunilji. Thank you, Devra. Thank you, Gunjan.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thanks for a patient hearing. Thank you and hope to see you again soon. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye, sir. Bye. Bye.